Oh boy, have we got an episode for you guys tonight. We did Dennis DeYoung a little over a month ago, and today we are going to dig deep and do the 5 album catalog of none other than Tommy Shaw from Styx. And to help me do that today, got 2 special guests as normal here. Mr. Davey Cretin from Cretin's Classics, Mr. Tom Jennings from Tuning In with Tom podcast, Turntable Tuesdays with Tom, Niagara Gazette Tom, Man of a
Jeez.
Thousand Hats Tom.
Buffalo Bill Santa
man.
Claus.
Yeah.
Renaissance man.
You're so busy.
But you know what? I want to be a blue collar man.
Oh, there you go.
I'm always keeping my eye on a better life.
All right. Well, as I bring you guys in here, we want to thank everyone for tuning in and being in our world tonight. And if you know what song that is from, you're a genius. All right. So let's let Davey start off here. Davey, give us a quick rundown on the albums we're going to be doing here and a little bit about Mr. Tommy Roland Shaw.
Okay. In the mid-'70s, he was plucked out of obscurity to join Styx when John Cyrulewski left the band suddenly because he didn't want to tour anymore. He wanted to be a family man. So for the Equinox tour, they brought in Mr. Tommy Shaw. And then his first appearance was on Crystal Ball, 1976 Styx album. Then in the early 80s, the band was sort of at loggerheads because James Young and Tommy Shaw were not thrilled with the album, and the whole concept of Kilroy was here. So the band sort of went on a hiatus, but they never officially announced it. They released a live album in 1984. I guess it was their contractual obligation with A&M Records, called Caught in the Act Live, a double live album. Had one studio track on it called Music Time, which was a poppy new wave-ish song that it got airplay on MTV, correct, Joseph? And it's a little bit of a goofy video, but it's a cute, funny song. I never had a problem with it, but I know a lot of Styx fans hate that song. Tommy Shaw is in the video for one brief moment, and he's waving, and he's sort of waving goodbye to the band because in 1984, he started his solo career with the album Girls with Guns, and since then, he's released 4 other albums, so we're ranking the 5 studio records of Mr. Thomas Roland Shaw.
All right, very good. Let's get right into it. Let's roll up the sleeves and let's dig right in. Give us your number 5.
Okay, my number 5 album actually came in at number 2 on the Billboard charts, but it's the top bluegrass albums. It was number 2. It's Tommy Shaw's record from March of 2011 called The Great Divide. And it's a little over 30 minutes, and it's actual bluegrass music because he's from Alabama. He's a big country guy. And there's always been a lot of country influences in his Styx songwriting. If you think of Crystal Ball, if you think of the verse part, the mellow part of not Man in the Wilderness. The song just flew right out of my head. From Grand Illusion.
The what?
Fooling yourself,
country vibe? Yeah,
man.
fooling yourself.
I got the olds, I guess, as they would say on SOT.
Well, wilderness is country, Davey. So that's there's a confusion.
That's true. Yes, my lizard brain over here, as my buddy Grant would say. At any rate, so it's a little over a half hour. It was produced by Tommy Shaw, Brad Davis, and Will Evankovich, who is now an actual member of Styx because he's a big songwriter. So this is all bluegrass with bluegrass musicians except Tommy Shaw. He's playing guitars and dobro and mandolin and this and that. Alison Krauss appears on this album, and she sings 2 tracks on here, or sings co-leads and background on 2 tracks. He worked with her on his previous record, but more on that later. Dwight Yoakam sings a song. Jerry Douglas plays some guitars and mandolins. Sam Bush, who's another name in the bluegrass folky field, is on it. For what this is, it's a very good album, but it's not really my genre and my type of music. But there's no denying that Tommy Shaw sounds great here. And somehow, a lot of singers, their voices just don't hold up. and his held up, and Styx is still doing, I guess, most, if not all, of their songs in the original keys, because Tommy Shaw just brings it vocally at every performance. So his voice sounds great from the lowest lows to the highest highs, I have in my notes. And I really enjoy how Alison Krauss and Tommy Shaw, how their voices blend together. To me, that's the highlight of the album here. Shaw is singing quite high on the title track, and then Krauss goes even higher and tops him. So their vocal blend is excellent on the title track, and also when they sing together on Afraid to Love. Give Him Hell, Harry reminds me of Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant a little bit, so, but not in a good way. So that's, to me, the low point on here is Give Him Hell, Harry. That's a song I don't ever have to hear again. That song drags the album down a little. And the bonus track, The View from Up There, is okay. And it was number 2 on the Bluegrass album chart, so it did sell. Surprisingly, he never did a follow-up to it. So that's my number 5. The Great Divide from 2011.
Okay. Mr. Jennings.
Dang, dude, you are a tough guy to follow, Davey.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have such extensive notes. Me, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I will mention that Alison Krauss, yeah, I mean, she shows up on another Tommy Shaw album. I wonder what the backstory is behind that. A slightly off topic, but since she does appear on 2 Tommy Shaw albums, just one of the most wonderful female vocalists ever. I just love her voice, and obviously she's working with Robert Plant right now, and but just some of the stuff that she's done has just been absolutely incredible. So, yeah, I wonder how Tommy and her hooked up. Well, I think he lives in Nashville, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so maybe that's the connection. My number 5 is a different one.
Wow.
And it is I got the Great Divide a little higher. It's Ambition. And I'll tell you why without getting into specific songs. I don't know. I think this album, just the production on it is just awful. I mean, I don't know. There were sounds that he was experimenting with that just maybe he was trying a little bit too hard to catch some kind of pop element. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really have any strong songs on it, and it just sounds dated. I just did not enjoy listening to this record. I mean, it was good, I will say, because it's Tommy Shaw, like you said. I mean, the advantage of Tommy Shaw is he's got a great voice. You know, you can listen to Tommy Shaw sing even a kind of mediocre song, but I was just, man, I don't know. I wish that he hadn't been kind of mired in the moment when he was putting this one out. One of the guys that's on here, Paul Wickens, that's Wickens. I believe he played with The Who. He's a keyboardist. Is that correct? And
Paul McCartney played with Paul McCartney.
Oh, he was with McCartney. I knew I recognized the name. So he was McCartney's keyboardist. I thought he'd played with The Who, but it was McCartney.
He may have, but definitely Macca.
Yeah. Richie Cannata, the saxophonist for Billy Joel. There's a cut on here, which I can't remember off the top of my head. Davey, you take better notes than I do. That just sounds like a Billy Joel song sung by Tommy Shaw. I think there's a couple of tracks on here where Richie definitely makes his presence known in terms of his presence. So there you go. That's what I got.
Okay. Very good. Well, obviously, Davey had a different one. You had a different one. But me, I'm actually agreeing with Mr. Cretin. Number 5, The Great Divide. I like country music a little bit. None of the newer stuff. I'm more of a traditionalist. Like the early 80s, late 70s, because that's, what my parents listened to, and that's what we were kind of subjected to during growing up time before, I started getting into rock and roll. But I will say, the album itself, you got to be in the right mood to listen to it, for me at least, just because it's got the way it's drawn out and everything. Not too much really stood out for me, unfortunately, on this one, as far as songs. But I will say Back in Your Kitchen was interesting. I like the lyrics and the way, and that was actually co-written with Shaw and Gary Burr. And Gary Burr also wrote 2 other tracks on this album. So if you're familiar with Mr. Gary Burr, he also had written some top 10 hits, including Love's Been a Little Bit Hard on Me, from none other than Juice Newton back in 1982. So there's a little bit of interesting stuff there. So obviously this guy's from Nashville, and there was a lot of connections, with this album, the recording and the musicians used on it, as far as, and Will being on here. And another connection about Will, obviously, is he is the 3rd person that was with Shaw and Blades when they did the Shaw Blades tour back in 2007, which you didn't mention. You just mentioned how he's a member in Styx now. But that's how they initially got hooked up, when they got hooked up with the Jack Blades, Tommy Shaw tour. That's how Will got, noticed. And then ever since then, I guess they've been great friends and working together all these years down the road here. So interesting, but to say the least. But that's my number 5, none other than good old Great Divide.
Okay, my number 4, Tom already mentioned it, from 1987, his debut record on Atlantic Records, Ambition. And this record did not chart. 44 and a half minutes long, produced by Terry Thomas from the kind of obscure band Charlie, who always had great album covers in the vein of Roxy Music. And Tommy Shaw co-produced it with Terry Thomas. Now, on this tour, I saw Tommy Shaw open up for Rush at the Nassau Coliseum. He was the opening act, and he was alternating between Styx songs, solo songs, Styx song, solo song, Styx song, solo song. And he was good, but he almost seemed dwarfed by the size of the venue, because Rush didn't give him much of the stage. So the band was sort of smushed together on the stage. But he was good. From this album, I like the 2 singles, No Such Thing and Ever Since the World Began, which is a Survivor cover, and it actually peaked at number 75 on the Billboard singles chart. But I've always had it in for this record, as Martin Popoff loves to say, because I think the production kills this record.
Yep.
Because Tommy Shaw's voice is just drenched, absolutely drenched in reverb and echo, and it just drives me crazy. And it has, since I first got this, I was working in my first record store gig, and I special ordered this for myself on vinyl. And we ended up getting 2 copies, and I don't think we ever sold the second one. I bought the first one, and the first time I played it, I said, why does his vocals they don't sound right to me on this record? It's such an 80s production, and it just drives me crazy. That's strike number 1, just all the reverb and echo and effects on his vocals just drive me bonkos. So that's strike number 1. Strike number 2, why do you have another guy playing lead guitar on the record? As JY would say, you're Tommy freaking Shaw. You're Tommy bleeping Shaw. Why do you need another guitar player? This guy Charles Shaughnessy or something plays lead guitar on a few songs. Strike number 2 on this record. Strike number 3 that really goes over the top for me, drum programming and synth bass.
Yep.
What the heck? It's so artificial sounding. That is strike 3. You're out of here, Ambition. Now, some positive things about the record before I totally tear it apart. As Tom said, the great Paul Wickens plays keyboards from McCartney's band, maybe The Who, I'd have to look it up. And Peter John Batiste, who played on one of my favorite Jethro Tull albums, The Broadsword and the Beast, also appears on keyboards on the Survivor cover, Ever Since the World Began. I think this record is front-loaded, and side 1 is definitely better than side 2. JY, James Young from Styx, is credited with vocals on the album. I don't hear him. Where the heck is he? Nobody knows. He's lost on the record. This is my least favorite Tommy Shaw album that's not a bluegrass album. I don't think he's a great prolific songwriter. He seemed to write more back in the day with Styx, and he's just not writing enough songs. He's not putting out enough material to be in the public eye for so long and to only have 5 solo records. I don't know. He's a sterling guitar player. He's an underrated singer. I love his acoustic and electric work. I even love his shamisen playing on Just Get Through This Night from Kilroy was here. But the production just destroys this album. So number 4 from 1987, Ambition.
I feel like you should have dropped the mic after that, Davey.
And walked off the set.
Yeah. Strike 3. You're out of here. I'm out of here.
It's like the Mets. Strike 3.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I feel like I set the table for Davey, and then he just went to town on the. Yeah, I agree with you. I do hear JY's vocals in there, though.
Yeah, it's background vocal, so it's harder to pick up.
Yeah, you can
gotta
hear
have
it. It
headphones
does
on.
have that kind of Styxy thing, but yeah, the synths and everything. I don't know. It was a tough listen. It was a very tough listen. All right, what are we at? Number 4?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
My number 4 has a number in the title. 7. It's Deadly Zens. Oh, look
Wow.
at Joseph being
Look
all
at
upset.
Davey. Davey gave you the same look.
I thought that would be your number 1.
Oh no.
Wow.
No,
Surprise.
I believe that this, I'm going to go back to I'm going to piggyback on something you said that I agree with. Tommy Shaw is not a great songwriter, but I think he's a great collaborative songwriter. I think when he's with and I think that's the reason him and Will are work so well together, is they clearly can write together. It goes beyond. I mean, you can always just get another guitarist or another background vocalist. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think Will is able to write with Tommy. When Dennis and Tommy were getting along, which is that sweet spot of the Styx catalog, the Pieces of 8, Grand Illusion, Crystal Ball to a certain degree. I mean, I don't think I think the Crystal Ball was still some stuff Tommy brought in. It was still very Dennis driven. And, Cornerstone. There's some great Tommy stuff on there too. But again, collaborative, Paradise Theater, same thing. By the time you get to Kilroy, and even when I interviewed Dennis, I remember him saying that, Tommy just didn't have a lot of stuff to bring to the table for Kilroy. But I think that also speaks to the fact that the two of them weren't working well together. And what was that one album they came out with where they did separate tracks? Brave New World?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
98.
So, another case in point. Then you fast forward to today, Mission and Crash of the Crown. Great stuff on those records, co-written by Will, because Will and Tommy work well together. So I think that's kind of what drives Tommy, is if he has somebody that he can write with. I mean, both Damn Yankees albums are 10 times better than anything that we're going to be talking about today in the solo catalog. Even, the live album that Tommy did with the Kids Orchestra or whatever it was called, phenomenal. But in terms of just his solo records, yeah, they're just missing something. Now, Seven Deadly Zens, there are some great songs on it, but again, part of that was because there was a collaborative effort. I think there was at least one cast off from the Damn Yankees record, if I remember correctly, because there was supposed to be a third one. Now, I've also read where Tommy wasn't supposed to be in the third Damn Yankees record. It was going to be Damon Johnson, but I don't know. I assume that they had material for this third Damn Yankees album because there's the songwriting credits. And the Shaw Blades, the two albums, the one that was covers and then just the Shaw Blades albums, all the songs on the Shaw Blades album, the originals, there's not a dud on that record. I love that record.
It's a good album.
But again, I feel like Seven Deadly Zens is a little too inconsistent. My biggest complaint I have with this record is it sounds flat. Its production value, which is weird because I'm a Todd Rundgren fan, and Todd tended to produce records like this. So they wouldn't get caught in the time. So you go back to the last record we were talking about, which was Ambition, right? So Ambition, overproduced, product of its time, harder to listen to 30, 40 years later. Whereas if you make a record where you don't use a heavy-handed production technique and the songs are strong, it'll hold up. The problem is most of these songs aren't that strong. There's a lot of filler with maybe a few good songs that are thrown into it. So it's weird. I had a romantic thoughts about this album. I remembered it much better than it was when I revisited it for the ranking. And I was just like, wow, this is not nearly as good as I thought it was. And there was one record that I didn't think was nearly as good as I thought it was, which wound up much higher on the my rankings than maybe will be for you guys. But that's what I got. 7 Deadly Sins.
All right, very good. All right, my number 4 is one that we haven't talked about yet, and that will be the 1985 release, his second solo album, What If, which was produced by Richie Cannata and Shaw himself, peaking at number 87 on the charts, which was unfortunately, a worse charting position than the previous album, which was Girls with Guns. And this will be the album that where his association with A&M would end after this album. So you were talking about Ambition, new record label. They probably forced Terry Thomas onto him. We'll get more into that when I get into my ranking of that album. But what if though? A great album, really, in essence, and you don't really see a lot of people writing music about a lot of the subject matter that was on this album. Just talk about Reach for the Bottle, um, you know, probably in reference to touring and a lot of the problems that he had with previous bands and stuff like that. This is not a test. Jealousy obviously is the best song on the album by a mile. That's the lead-off cut. What If is the second song, which was also co-written with Richie Cannata, as was True Confessions. Him and Cannata wrote those two songs together, and he also played saxophone and keyboards on the album. And if you remember, he used to be in Billy Joel's band at one point. That's how they hooked up there. But overall, this album just doesn't, it's the fourth best Shaw album. It just doesn't do for me what the other three do. And I know I heard both your guys about your Ambition, but when I get to it, it's going to be a little bit different of a scenario, at least for me, than what you guys had it for. But What If is just a good album, a very good album, but just not as good as the other three that I got ranked ahead of it. That's basically the bottom line. You still hear some of that 80s production in there. It comes from the time that it was recorded, similar to Ambition. Maybe the production is a little bit better because you had Richie Cannata on it as opposed to Terry Thomas. But overall, still a very solid album, and what I love is seeing him using that same lineup maybe for Ambition, as opposed to they brought in all these different. It seems like Tom said, every album it seems like he's got different collaborators with him, which unfortunately that's when he only makes solo albums, and he made his first 3 solo albums all within like a 3-year period, and then he didn't make no solo album till about 12 years later, 11 years later, and then the other one,
9.
Bluegrass, which is even different. So, it is what it is. It's just that the ones I'm going to talk about going forward are going to have a lot more good songs on it as opposed to What If. And that's why it's number 4.
To follow that up, my number 3 is What If, 42.5 minutes. His last record for A&M Records, because like Joseph said, it didn't perform as well as his debut solo album. This album has always been quite vexing to me. I love some of it and I hate some of it. Some of the lyrics on a few of the songs just give me the D chills. The drum sound is piss poor on this record. I hate the drum sound. And Steve Holley from Wings, who's on this record and the first album, he's a really good drummer. And just the drum sound on here, it stinks. I don't think Cannata and Shaw knew how to produce drums at this point. Just the rhythm section is lost in the mix here. Let's see, what else do I have? My 3 favorites on this album: Remo's theme, What If, which is from the movie, Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. A cool action movie from the time. I saw it in the theaters, and I was jazzed when I heard Tommy Shaw singing the song. I think it was it was the end credits of the movie. Whatever. Yeah. Jealousy, like Joey said, is a really good song. And Nature of the Beast, all the way towards the end of side 2. Those are my 3 favorites. True Confessions and Bad Times, I think, are weak sauce throwaway songs. And Friendly Advice is the worst song associated with Tommy Shaw. In fact, on the reissue of it, they moved it from the 4th track to the end of the album. So even the record company and Tommy Shaw knew that song stinks. And just basically without the guiding force of his former band members and Styx, I just think he's a little rudderless here. So my number 3 album from 1985, What If?
All right. Well, you mentioned something I forgot to mention on Seven Deadly Zens, which I think the drums on Seven Deadly Zens is horrible too. The sound. I mean, it's Todd Suckerman. Okay, you got one of the best drummers in music, and the drum. I don't know what it is. I think maybe it was because Tommy produced it himself, but I just think it's so important to capture a good drum sound on a record. And I remember reading stuff about like Triumph records. There were a lot of them were. Gil Moore was their drummer, but I mean, they would set up in all kinds of different places just to make sure that they got a really good drum sound. And I think that sometimes is what separates an excellent album from a good album from a poor album. If you don't capture that right drum sound, because if they can just sound so damn flat. All right, but I'm off my pedestal. What are we, number 3?
Yes.
Yes.
What do you got? Are you surprising us? Are you changing it on the fly?
I'm not changing it.
All right.
I just know you guys are going to be mad. It's Girls with Guns. I just don't know how to do it. It's Girls with Guns. And the reason it's, I like this album. I really do. I own this one on vinyl. It's actually the only Tommy Shaw solo record I have on vinyl. But, and I saw him on this tour. I know, Dave, you were mentioning you saw him open up for Rush. I saw him open up for the Kinks.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. And it was weird. It was like the Kinks were on, man, it was a latter album.
Word of Mouth, 1984.
Yeah.
Must have been Word of Mouth. Yeah. So Word of Mouth. And they were playing a hockey arena here near my hometown, the Rochester War Memorial, Rochester, New York. It held about, I think, 9,000. And there maybe was 3,500 there. I mean, the place was just dead. So when he came on, he played to a very small house because, a lot of people would come late for the opening act. But you also had people that came, for Tommy Shaw, because he still was a draw for a lot of young girls and whatnot. But, and he did the same thing. He did kind of half the Girls with Guns and then half Stick songs. So, it was okay. I felt like he captured the sound of the album and the spirit of the album, but the Stick songs and the Girls with Guns songs didn't necessarily fit. And that's okay, because I think with Tommy Shaw, I respect the fact that when he did his first solo album, and it makes sense when you're doing your first solo album, is you want to make sure that you're not necessarily compared to your previous band, but you also don't want to just put out an album that sounds like your previous band. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I got. Oh, the song Girls with Guns, I absolutely love, though. And when he did that on that solo recording, I thought it was phenomenal.
I thought it was great in the acoustic show too, what they did with the Blades and Will.
With Shaw, Shaw Blades, yeah.
They didn't play that on every show. We got lucky to see that one.
Well, it's interesting because you listen to that song and it sounds like it's really overproduced in the sense that there's a lot going on in it. But, if you can take away the bells and whistles from a song and it's still a really good song, then it's a really good song. So as much as it is a really good song with all those kind of bells and whistles and keyboards and whatnot, at its core, it's still kind of a fun, boppy song. Makes sense?
Yep. All right. You got anything else for us on that one, or is that it?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have copious notes.
Wow.
I mean, Dave even has a better vocabulary. Like, he uses words like vexed. I don't know when I'd ever use that word.
All right. So that was
Has Tia been coaching you on the words? Are you just a wordsmith?
No. She's just my producer with the lighting and
She's the
sound.
producer. Yeah. The producer, Tia. We always have to mention her in every episode as well.
All right. So my number 3 is going to be the album that you guys totally tore apart and ripped. the 1987 Ambition. So obviously this one definitely sounds like it was recorded in the 80s. And one thing guys didn't you mentioned about how Terry Thomas was in Charlie, but he also produced a lot of albums afterwards. This was might have been one of his very first ones. But remember, if you remember, he produced the Bad Company albums with Brian Howe, and it seems like every album got a little bit better and better until they stopped making the albums with Howe. And he also produced a Tesla album, if you remember.
Who was
Bust a
that?
Nut.
The
Terry
Terry.
Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Which Tesla record?
Bust a Nut.
Okay.
Yep,
I
he
didn't even
produced that
realize
album,
that.
and I see that's something you didn't know, did you?
I didn't realize.
good
I didn't
songs on
realize
there.
that somebody would come out with an album called "Bust a Nut." What is that?
They did.
Yeah, well, hey, it went gold,
Wow.
man. At the time when that music was supposedly dead,
I guess.
1994. Yep.
Yeah, good old. We got Bustin' Out. We got Cherry Pie. We got all kinds of weird stuff going on back then, eh?
Yeah.
Oh well.
All right.
Tesla
So
are better than any hair metal band.
Yeah, I
Tesla
like them.
ruled.
Yeah, they're all right.
all right.
They're
So
getting they're getting better.
1987.
I got that.
I think with Ambition, the album starts off in a really good place. You start off with No Such Thing. A little bit different type of a song for Shaw, vocally, and the way they got everything all coming in at you on that one, with the chorus and everything. Dangerous Game, another song that is pretty good. A little long. I think one of the problems with this album is the songs are a lot longer and more longer in the tooth. All of them pretty much are 4 minutes or more, but they keep them all under 5, which is cool. Um, Davey, you mentioned Ever Since the World Began was a Survivor song. And oddly enough, and I didn't even know this, that song actually Shaw got it on the charts. It was number 75, oddly enough. I never even knew that that song was even released as a single, because you got to remember at that time our rock radio station folded up and they went to like a light FM station, so we didn't have anybody playing this one, sadly enough. So that didn't help out the cause any when you got radio stations that were not rock anymore. So there was nowhere to really play this album. Not that it might have fared a little bit better had that been the case. Who knows? Hindsight's 2020 here. But yeah, so the interesting thing is Shaw did write, except for that one song that's just Frankie Sullivan and Jim Peterick wrote from Survivor. Him and Thomas teamed up on the rest of them pretty much, except for Lay Them Down, which was credited to just Shaw. And the usual. He still had Richie Canada on saxophone. They kept that relationship going, and like you said, JY, it's just on the backing vocals, so you don't really hear him as much. And they actually had an interesting guy also on backing vocals, none other than Leah Hart. For those fans who know of him, he also came in later on, well after Dave King left Fastway, and took over the lead vocals for 2 albums for Fastway with Fast Eddie Clark there. So yeah, a bunch of tie-ins that make it interesting. And another note, you guys were mentioning about Paul Wickens. Interesting, he actually was the musical director since 1989 for McCartney. So that's
Nice.
a big thing when you're actually the musical director in a band, especially one of that magnitude, Paul McCartney. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's a high position to have when you're the music
Hey,
director.
we don't all get to work with a former member of Wings.
Or for the matter that other band, which we won't mention.
Yeah, Wings.
Yeah. Funny. All right. So there you got for me my stated my case for Ambition. I think it's much better than what you two guys had said about it. So that'll be the last time you'll hear us talk about this album. My number 3, Ambition.
A lot of the songs on that record fade out. None of them have hard stops. They all just fade out. And that's another thing I forgot to write down that drives me bonkers about that record.
Yeah.
My number 2 record was already mentioned, from 1998. Did not chart. 60 minutes long, his one and only album for CMC International Records, Seven Deadly Zens with a Z. As Tom said, it was produced by Tommy Shaw and also a dude named Eddie Ashworth, whomever that might be. Sorry, Mr. Ashworth, I'm just not sure who you are. There's over a dozen named guests on this record, and perhaps this is the most Tommy Shaw of all the Tommy Shaw solo records. It rocks, it's less poppy, but it just has too many songs, which is a big thing we always discuss from the 90s on CD. Just everyone started elongating their records instead of 30 or 40 minutes like they used to do in the 70s, maybe the early 80s. Everyone's doing 50, 60, 70, even 80-minute records when it comes to a lot of the prog bands, but that's another story for another time. So this record is too long, too many songs. I think it would be a better record if they knocked off a few songs, and there's a lot of interstitial instrumental interludes that connect some of the later tracks. Just knock those the heck out, and you have a much tighter record. So with all that, another Tommy Shaw record that's front-loaded, and I like the first 2/3 of the album the best, and I think the last third drags with all those extra instrumentals that connect the later, longer songs. They're just not necessary. Get them the heck out of there. Ocean, the first song, rocks. It's a really good song. Stop Knockin', the second song, has a great Kansas-esque, say that, I can't even say it, violin solo from the great Jerry Goodman. And Half a Mind is Tommy Shaw's first song with Alison Krauss. That's a really good song. Country folky vibe, but their voices sound so great together. I can't deny it. Great song, sounds excellent. Love that vocal blend of those harmonies. And then another song, Inspiration, Mona Lisa, I find really catchy. And Peace, Love, and then in parentheses, Weird, is up there in suckage with friendly advice from What If. This is a good album, but it's just not great. Just a little too long. So that is my number 2, Seven Deadly Zens from June of 1998.
All I gotta say is up there in suckage. That was the great. That's the quote of the episode.
That song is unnecessary. Get rid of it.
It's up there in suckage. Oh, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Number
It's
2.
up to me. Number 2. Well, yeah, I only got 2 to choose from. You certainly can't let me do The Great Divide as number 1, because then you'd really just never invite me back. But
Exactly.
no, it's my number 2. Number 2, The Great Divide.
Wow.
But listen, guys, I like bluegrass. My son was in a bluegrass themed band for years.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Davey, you kind of touched on it, that, he's from Alabama. I think this is the kind of, I'll tell you what I like about this album. I feel like Tommy finally, of all the solo albums that he put out, and I could almost make a case for it for number 1 for this reason. This felt like him being free to do what he wanted to do, as opposed to living up to a certain expectation of Tommy Shaw. When you're a solo artist that has been established in a major band, for the most part, there's an expectation when you come out of that band to, sound like them to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you listen to the Lefsetz letter, Bob Lefsetz had an interview with Charlie Brusco, who's Styx's manager. And they had this interesting conversation where Lefsetz goes, yeah, well, Styx wanted to do some new albums. So what was your advice to him? He says, Tommy Shaw called me up and wanted to do some Styx records. And I told him, I don't care if you make another Styx record, but it better sound like Styx. So there's that expectation. He kind of had to work within those parameters, because you slap the name Styx on it, you better sound like Styx. And I think to some degree, you have an expectation with Tommy Shaw. So you have to find that balance. Who is Tommy Shaw, the solo artist? Who is Tommy Shaw and Damn Yankees? Who is this guy? To me, this just feels like the one record where he could kind of, be himself. You can call it a vanity project to a certain degree, but a lot of times when artists do like standards records or things like that, it really sounds very convoluted, like they're just like, oh, I'm going to do a Christmas record. It doesn't sound natural or like something that they love. final example before I let you go, because you already discussed the songs on it, but Linda Ronstadt did an album called Canciones de mi Padre or something like that. I can't pronounce it, Spanish. So the whole album is these, songs sung in Spanish, things that she grew up with. But it was just a record that she wanted to make of music that she really loved, that was an important part of her life. That's what I feel like this record is to Tommy Shaw. It's his most authentic solo work, and maybe his most authentic work, period, for that matter. So because of that, I really enjoy it. And again, I happen to like the genre. It wasn't something that I wasn't a real fan of until my son was in a kind of a bluegrass, steampunk, whatever you want to call it, band with the banjo, the whole 9 yards. And he's just listened to a lot of banjo stuff. And I'm a Grateful Dead fan. And of course, Jerry Garcia, Old and in the Way is probably the top selling bluegrass album of all time. So I have an affection for bluegrass. I can listen to it. So again, you combine a genre which I like with a singer from one of my favorite bands in the universe, Styx, and it's great. That's what I got.
All right, very good.
That was well spoken.
Why, thank you, Davey.
And surprising to be that high, but hey, that's what it's all about.
It's it's always subjective. That's the thing, is that none of our three opinions. We can joke about being the smartest guy in the room or whatever, but there's so much that goes into it in terms of even when a song finds you. We've had that conversation. If you hear a song at a certain time in your life, if there was a song that was playing, let's say when you met the love of your life, and that was a song on the radio, you're going to have an affection towards that song until you divorce her. No, I'm just kidding. But or a song that was played at your high school dance, or a song that was played, at a football game where when your team won the championship, all those types of things.
Yeah.
So those are all subjective. Where you were in high school, where you were in life, if you had a bad year, maybe that year's music is something that you don't personally enjoy. But really, obviously, the goal of all these shows is to stoke conversation. And it's also to emphasize the fact we can all have differences of opinion about things and still be good friends.
Still get along. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so far we're really opposite on a lot of our choices on this particular ranking, which I really thought it'd be a little bit more cohesive. It seems like me and Davey are more on the same page than you for once, which you guys are usually more on the same page compared to me.
Yeah.
But all right, let me get into my number 2 because of the fact that this was going to be my number 1. And then I decided just to give the albums one more listening, only because they were neck and neck and the other one speeded out by a smidge. And then I said, I better listen to these one more time. And I did. And the 1984 release, Girls with Guns, gets bumped at the last second and comes down to my number 2. And it's not because, obviously it does sound like it belongs in the period that it was recorded. It definitely sounds like it was recorded in the 80s. But it's got probably my 2 favorite Tommy Shaw solo songs on this album. No doubt the 2 singles, Girls with Guns, Lonely School. I think Lonely School is probably the most underrated song in Tommy's whole catalog. I mean, that song just... I just like Tom said, there's certain songs, they just hit you in a certain way. And then you always end up loving that song for whatever reason. And that's one of those songs for me, Lonely School. I just always, and it's weird because there's no other songs quite like it on this album. It stands out a mile compared to the rest of the songs. You put that next to Girls with Guns, are 2 totally different songs. One's a ballad, and Girls with Guns is like the rocker and blazer on the album. And then you mix in the rest of the album where you got I will just list a couple examples. Come On and Explain, that's a harder rocking song. And Heads Up, The Sky is Falling, another good song there that kind of makes you memorize the lyrics there. Little Girl World is an interesting song that I always seem to tend to fall back on this album. I really like that one. That one stands out for me. So for some strange reason, the title's a little strange, but the song itself is pretty cool. And you know, this album came in, like I think Davey mentioned earlier on at one point, number 50 on the charts. So it did fairly well for his first ever solo album. You know, it didn't go platinum or anything like that, or gold or nothing like that, but still, it's a solid debut. It was actually produced by Mike Stone, who as we all know, produced Asia, the first Asia album. So he produced Asia and Alpha. So he was on a roll the 2 years before this album came out. And Girls with Guns charted at number 33. So that gave Tommy a top 40 hit, as well as Dennis, who came out with his album around the same time with Desert Moon, but his made the top 10, Desert Moon. Lonely School was the single, but it only reached number 60, but it did have a video on MTV. So it got a lot of airplay, you know, and it did very well. I would have thought it would have done a lot better, because that's this song's very special to me. But other than that, Girls with Guns, overall a very, very solid album. And you know, like I said, it was going to be my number one until just one more listen, and it brought it down to number two. But it's definitely a great album for sure in my catalog.
Okay. Coming in at me for number one from 1984, Girls with Guns. Joey just spoke very eloquently about it. The thing is, about this record, I have really good memories about it because I had a Sony Walkman and I had this on record and cassette. And of course, the cassette and eventually the CD had two longer versions of songs. One of them just might be my favorite song on the record, Kiss Me Hello. I think on the CD and the cassette comes in at 7 minutes and 45 seconds. And I love that song. So I used to listen to the cassette on my Sony Walkman. And I remember we went on a family trip, and I was still a teenager at the time, to Florida. And I think this was the one cassette tape I brought with me. So I listened to it over and over. And that's why it's my favorite Tommy Shaw record. This record to me has more of a band feel than his other solo records, because it was just him, the keyboard player, Brian Stanley on bass, Steve Holley on drums, and it has that Stixy sound because it's a cohesive band. Mike Stone's production is good. It's not great, but that's the times. It's the mid-'80s there. Let's see. I also saw Tommy Shaw live, just like Tom did on this tour. But I saw him at my college in the Student Union building in Queens College, in Queens, New York, over here.
New York.
So it's a very small, long place. And I remember being in the back right of the room, and the stage was so low, it was hard to see the band, but I was there. I did see him on a solo tour. Songs I really like from this album, the title track, of course, is very catchy, poppy, and upbeat. Come In and Explain, a really good hard rocker. Lonely School, Little Girl World. Free to Love You, I think, is really good. I love the keyboards on that song. And Kiss Me Hello, I think, is just an epic, great ballad and some great guitar work by Tommy Shaw, because he's the only guitar player on this record. Probably my two least favorite songs are Outside in the Rain and The Race Is On, but they're buried towards the end of side two. So this is my favorite Tommy Shaw solo record, Girls with Guns from 1984. My number one, numero uno.
Numero uno.
See?
I guess I didn't realize that the cassette version had the longer version. I thought maybe they just did that for the CD release.
Cassette and CD.
Both, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And this was, well, I'm trying to think, I guess by then CDs were kind of becoming the thing, right? So, I mean, this was a readily available on CD. It wasn't something that came out later, correct?
Well, a lot of CDs back in the day came out later than their LP.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was trying to remember.
6 months, a year, maybe longer.
Yeah. And they were stupid expensive.
They were.
Those big long boxes till the environmentalists got mad.
Which I still have a ton of those long boxes.
I still have a ton of environmentalists in my life. Just kidding. Well, not really. I suppose I do. All right. Well, number one for me, What If? Yes. I know you
Surprising.
guys both have a look of disappointment in your face.
No, just surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I gave this one a listen. I just felt like man, I forgot how much I liked Remo's theme. I really like that song.
Great song.
Yeah, Jealousy's good. I think again, the production on this is probably, I'd say production is, I think it's the best of all of his solo records. In terms of the sound he gets, it's not too 80s. It's got the Billy Joel type influence throughout or whatever, but it sounds good. The drums got some pop to them. Vocals are good, So yeah, I liked it. I think it's a little, I don't know why. I just think it's a little bit better than Girls with Guns.
All right.
You see things differently.
We do, yeah. I mean, that's okay. That's okay. This is not an album I spent a lot of time with either. So maybe that was the thing. Maybe I just gotten to the point where I was like, I don't know if this ever happens with you guys. I feel like sometimes you set yourself up for disappointment when you go to a record, like you really expect it to be great. There was that time, let's say, I don't know, I'll use Boston as an example. Okay. So, Third Stage comes out. We all have a certain expectation of that record, like that they almost couldn't live up to that expectation based on the first two records. But I think it's kind of the same way too, is that a lot of times I find that I'll discover records that I really like, or even bands when I go see them live, when I have the lowest of expectations. Like when I go to listen to a record, I think, oh yeah, this one will probably be okay. Like, oh wow, I really enjoyed that. That was a really good listen. I find I get that too with some artists where you maybe discover a new band. Somebody be like, oh, come see these guys, and be like, whatever. I like a couple of their songs. I'll go. And then you're like, holy crap, these guys are amazing.
Yeah, I got a good example for you. John Kay and Steppenwolf. He was getting bashed before the show by this guy with the beard here and another colleague of ours.
Me?
Yeah.
I was bashing
John
Kay.
Kay and Steppenwolf were getting
Come
bashed.
on.
Oh, they go, well, he was horrible the last time he was here, blah, 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 blah. And what happens at the end of the show? Here they are both giving him a standing ovation. Unbelievable. I remember you remember that when I gave you guys grief on that. But like you said, you did not expect it to be that good.
Yeah, and sometimes people have bad nights and they come back and they blow you away. And I think in some ways it's the opposite can be true, where you see a show that maybe was extraordinarily good, but you don't know that it was extraordinarily good. And so then the next time they come around, you're like, oh, wow, that's kind of disappointing,
Yeah. All right. So obviously, you've been paying attention out there. My number one was going to be my number two, but it became my number one after another listen, and that was none other than Seven Deadly Zens. Not counting the Great Divide, because that's a whole different genre. I would say Seven Deadly Zens is probably the most mature recording Shaw has done to date, as far as subject matter and the writing of the material. Obviously he had a lot of help on this one. He had a slew of guests on this album. And like Tom mentioned, Zuckerman's drums. I don't really find a big deal problem with the drumming on the album, the sound. I mean, I think the songs kind of dictate the way the drumming sounds on here, just because, if you listen to a great song like Inspiration, which is just that's my favorite song off this album, Inspiration. Just give it a good listen. That song has so much going on in it, and I really
don't get me wrong, Joey. I'm not talking about the quality of the playing. The playing is fine. Yeah, I just mean that the drums themselves, for whatever reason, they just sound really flat.
Well, not to me.
Well, give it.
That's what I was.
Try to listen for it.
That's what I was pointing out. I'm not saying that. No, there was no problem with any of the people playing on the album whatsoever. Yeah. And one thing, if you remember, even on lead guitar, which is kind of weird, Mr. Ted Nugent makes an appearance even on here. He plays on Ocean, which is one of the heavier songs on the album that kicks off the whole affair, and A Place to Call My Own. Jack Blades plays bass on this, along with a couple other guys, including former Whitesnake member Marco Mendoza. Michael Cardellone also plays additional drums on here, so I would assume the songs that Zuckerman doesn't play on, that Cardellone, his former Damn Yankee partner in crime, came in on and did a couple songs as well. And
Current Leonard Skinner drummer.
Yeah, and there's even another name we're going to throw out here for you. Ed Roland has a little bit of a vocal credit on here on the first track, Ocean. Probably hard to pick him up on that with just a middle eight vocal, it says here. But one of the highlights of the album, though, features Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon on co-lead vocals, and that's none other than Straight Down the Line, which was a song that Tommy and Jack Blades wrote together. Back to the matter at hand here. Yeah, I just feel, this album maybe a little bit too long, like Davey said. This was like the CD age, so there's so many tracks on here, 13 in all. I feel he could have definitely cut off about 3 or 4 tracks and had a really strong album. I mean, there's a couple tracks on here that I could definitely do without. I thought out of the highlights of the album, besides Mona Lisa, Inspiration Mona Lisa, which is the best song according to me, All in How You Say It was a standout track. I really love that one. And What Do You Want from Life, Tom Jennings? Another great song. How can you not like that one? That's definitely a standout here.
I don't know, man. I hate it. I hate it when people steal song titles from other songs.
The Tube song is better.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I naturally compare songs that have the same title. I just, like Hold On. There's a whole bunch of Hold Ons. What do you got? Wilson Phillips, Triumph, Kansas.
And you guys already
There's at least one other ones, right?
You're getting ahead of the game, but we'll be talking about that at the end of the episode here. But that's a good point that you just brought up, because I'm already got our next episode all lined up. If you guys are interested, we'll talk about that in just a moment.
Okay.
Let me finish up on this one here.
Okay.
So Diamond is a standout.
Yeah, I love that. I forgot to mention that one.
Really thought Who I Am was another one that kind of I really enjoyed a lot on here. And I think after that, those last 3, I could have kicked them right off this album, and we could have had a really great album. But still, overall, definitely a solid effort from Shaw and his cohorts here. And that's my number 1, 7 Deadly Zens. So you guys got anything in closing on this catalog? I do real quick, and I'll turn it over to you guys to finish up. I thought I really liked the Tommy Shaw catalog, but after listening to it and going back here, I didn't realize that it's not as, like Tom had mentioned earlier on, you expect something to be really good, but it wasn't as good as I was remembering it. But I do feel the Girls of Guns, 7 Deadly Zens definitely stand out for me. Really good. And I think Ambition and What If, I think those ones kind of, I don't know, something about those albums where I thought they were better than what they were. And now that I listen to them some more, I don't know. I just felt that they definitely placed with me where they needed to be. And that's unfortunately not in the top 2 slots. That's for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Tommy, some of the stuff he did in Damn Yankees and again, Shaw Blades, just incredible stuff. And I think in recent years, he's just kind of found his creative muse with, kind of getting back to Styx and working in that context. And that's a good place for him. There are some people that are just better in bands than they are as a solo artist. I mean, so I don't hold that against him. I mean, he's a great artist, and it's hard. It's hard to do a solo album. I think it's hard to do a solo album again when again, not only the expectations, but you always got to be careful who you surround yourself with too. I've shared this with, like, my wife and I have had this conversation, and a couple other friends, about certain groups that their publicist is not a fan of the band. Like, I'll have somebody try to set up an interview with me, and I'll get all fanboy, and they're kind of like, and a publicist I spoke to about this once said, yeah, in many ways it's better to have a publicist who's not a fan of the band, because they can present things in in a more objective manner. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
to me, you know, if you love an artist too much, are you going to be the guy that says, "Oh, Tommy, this is a pretty mediocre record"? You know what I'm saying? But
Mhm.
I also think that we haven't really mentioned Dennis DeYoung a lot, but obviously the two of them are intertwined because of their time in Styx. And I
Mhm.
think one of the things is that you don't get the sense that Tommy had to like one up Dennis or anything. And I think it goes the other way with Dennis too. Sometimes like you look at the McCartney and Lennon feud post Beatles, that they would, do little things to write songs about each other. And in some ways it drove their creativity in the post Beatles era when the two of them were both alive. But I didn't get that sense with Tommy. And I don't know if that would have helped or if it would have hurt, but I
Mhm.
don't know. I just feel like to some degree there's just something missing in his solo work, except for the Great Divide again, which I said I feel is very authentic.
It's a good point. I think he's a great singer. He's an underrated guitar player. He's a
Yep.
good songwriter, but like you said, he needs other people to work with to bring out the best in him. That's why he's probably best in Styx, Damn Yankees, Shaw
Yep.
Blades.
Yeah.
Most of that stuff is better than his solo career.
And that other stuff is great. Like it's not good. It's great. Like anything
Yes.
out in the band context or the duo context, it's great. Like there's not a lot of filler. There's not a lot of, it's amazing. So again, I think in some ways that kind of hinders our ability to look at this solo catalog, knowing that he's done such great things in the band context.
Mhm.
Yes, it's a valid point. Very valid point.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, that'll close this episode on Mr. Thomas Shaw. And we got some other things planned on down the road here. And stay
Down the
tuned.
line.
Yeah, straight down the line. Yeah.
Straight down the line.
Definitely a lot of good things coming your way from us, and we will definitely keep up on the rankings and a couple other things you guys had mentioned. Tom mentioned some of the song titles being the same for certain artists. So that is what I'm going to focus in on for our next episode. Make it a little simpler because there's not a lot of listening involved, and you're only going to listen to a couple songs, and you don't have to do so much pre-prep and make so many notes about the next thing we're going to do. It's going to make it a lot easier for you guys. I
Okay.
know with our schedules, we try to get together once or twice a month, but it's really hard with everybody's busyness and everything going on for sure.
I know I got Oprah, I got Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, it's tough to find time to be on the show with you
Yeah, you got
gentlemen.
town hall meetings
Howard
and
Stern, you know,
And tuning in with Tom Jennings.
tuning in with Tom
yes,
Jennings. Yes. And I also have a self-help podcast called What to
nice,
Do with Your Old Explicit Content. You should give that a listen. It has nothing to do with music. Just me and another guy talking about stuff.
nice. And then obviously today, if you go to Tom Jennings' Facebook page, you'll see the old Turntable Tuesday with Tom.
Yeah.
So make sure you
CCR.
stop there. And then Mr. Davey Cretin, this guy's busier than all of us, I think, lately. Cretin's Classics is always popping up with new videos. He's got an interesting one that doesn't relate to music, called the rank. Tell him about it, Davey.
I ranked the brand new 2024 flavors of Chobani Creations dessert yogurt.
And I
they're
want to
all
say,
very good.
that was very cultured of you.
Boom, boom, psst. Thank you. I'm
So
also appearing on a lot of other people's channels right now. So if you go to Cretan Classics, you can look in guest appearances because I have more guest appearances right now than I do videos on my own channel. So somehow I have to right that wrong in the near future.
Hey, and I need more guest appearances.
yeah,
I'll have both of you guys on eventually.
Hey, yeah,
It's
have
like
us on.
catch up.
I'd be happy to guest appearance. Yep.
all right. Sounds good. All right. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you tune into all of our other ventures here in the great wide world.